Malik Devante hated cruises. He always had. Those floating boxes filled with tourists pretending they were relaxing in luxury instead of an expensive tin can. But Nima insisted. Malik, it'll be romantic. Malik, we need to spice things up. Malik, it's the best cruise ship in the Caribbean. Now, standing at the bar with a glass of whiskey in his hand, he watched his wife laugh a little louder than necessary at the words of the captain of this damn ship. Caribbean Pearl was the name of this floating wonder. 5 decks, 3 pools, 4 restaurants, a casino, and a spa. 7 whole days sailing from Miami to the islands and back. 7 days that he and Nima were supposed to spend together. Although, judging by the way she was fixing her hair and flirtatiously touching the captain's hand, she had other plans. Captain Tavin Brooks. Malik read his name on the gold plaque attached to his snow-white uniform. Tall, about 40, with impeccable posture and a confident smile. The kind of man who knows exactly what impression he makes on women. Nima was definitely impressed. Malik saw her looking at him, the same way she used to look at him, 20 years ago when they first met. Honey, Nima approached him, holding a glass of champagne. Captain Brooks invited us on a tour of the bridge tomorrow. Isn't that exciting? Malik nodded, taking a sip of whiskey. Of course, dear. That sounds great, he said, glancing at the captain, who was already entertaining the next group of passengers. He seems like a very attentive host. Oh, he's just charming, exclaimed Nima, fixing her hair. And you know, he said he remembers me. He saw my picture in Ebony magazine 10 years ago. Isn't that amazing? Amazing, Malik muttered through clenched teeth. Nima was 38, but she was still beautiful. Tall, slender, with flawless dark honey skin and long legs that always attracted admiring glances. In her youth, she had indeed worked as a model, not on the world's catwalks, but successfully enough for regional magazines and advertisements. That was where Malik met her when he was looking for a face for the advertising campaign for his first restaurant. Now, after 15 years of marriage, he has a chain of 7 restaurants in 3 states, and Nima has become the perfect wife of a successful businessman, or at least that's what he thought. Honey, I'm going to get changed for dinner. Nima kissed him on the cheek. See you in the cabin in an hour? Malik nodded, watching her figure in her tight sea green dress. She had definitely dressed to impress, and judging by Captain Brooks's gaze, she had succeeded. The evening passed in a blur. Dinner in the ship's main restaurant, meeting the other passengers at their table, polite conversation about the weather, the Caribbean, and places to visit. Nima was radiant, as always in company. She always knew how to be the life of the party, a quality that had once attracted Malik to her, but now, for some reason, annoyed him. Especially when Captain Brooks stopped at their table to ask if everything was all right. Mrs. Devante, he bowed slightly. I hope dinner is meeting your expectations? Oh, Captain, everything is just wonderful. Nima gave him her best smile. Isn't that right, Malik? Malik muttered something in response, and the captain turned his gaze to him. Mr. Devante, he extended his hand, I'm glad you decided to spend your vacation on the Caribbean Pearl. If you have any requests or questions, I'm always at your service. His handshake was firm and confident. His professional smile didn't reach his eyes. Thank you, Captain. Malik forced a smile. I'm sure your crew will do everything possible to make our trip unforgettable. Something in his tone made the captain pause for a moment before turning back to Nima. Don't forget about tomorrow's tour of the bridge. I'll be waiting for you both at 10 in the morning. After dinner, he and Nima strolled along the deck, watching the moonlight glisten on the dark water. Other couples were around them, some holding hands, some embracing at the railing. Once, he and Nima had been like that. Now there was a gulf between them, not physical, but emotional. Malik felt that she was far away from him, even though she was standing right next to him. What are you thinking about? He asked, putting his arm around her waist. How beautiful the sea is at night, she replied without looking at him. It's like another world. You looked happy today. Because I am happy, Malik, she turned to him. Isn't that why we're here? To relax, have fun, forget about everyday problems? Malik nodded silently. Maybe he was being too sensitive. Maybe Nima was just enjoying her vacation. and he was looking for problems where there weren't any. They returned to their cabin and made love, quickly, almost mechanically. Then Nima took a shower and went to bed, while Malik lay awake for a long time, listening to the steady hum of the engines. The next day passed without incident. A tour of the bridge, lunch, and an afternoon relaxing by the pool. The captain was professional and attentive to all the passengers, but Malik couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze lingered too often on Nima. Or was he being paranoid? The last couple of years of their marriage had not been ideal. They had grown apart. Malik immersed himself in his work, Nima in her charity projects and yoga classes. They lived parallel lives, occasionally crossing paths in their shared home. By evening, the sky was overcast and a tropical downpour began. Dinner was relatively uneventful. The captain did not show up, and Nima seemed a little disappointed. After dinner, Malik decided to try his luck at the casino, while Nima said she was tired and would go to her cabin. "Don't stay up too late." She kissed him on the cheek. "Tomorrow we arrive in Santa Lucia, and I want to go on all the excursions." Malik nodded and headed for the casino. After losing a couple of $100 at blackjack, he decided that was enough. The clock showed midnight. I wonder if Nima is asleep yet. They had agreed to meet in the cabin, but something told him to check the deck. Maybe she had decided to take a walk despite the rain. Malik went up to the upper deck. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp freshness. The dark sea merged with the horizon, with only a few stars peeking through the scattered clouds. The deck was almost empty. At this hour, most of the passengers were either asleep or entertaining themselves in the bars and clubs on the lower decks. After walking around almost the entire deck, Malik was about to return to his cabin when he heard a woman's laughter, the familiar laughter of Nima. It came from a shaded part of the deck, not far from the lifeboats. Malik cautiously approached. What he saw made him freeze in his tracks. In a secluded corner, hidden from prying eyes, stood Nima and Captain Brooks. They were standing so close to each other that not even a sheet of paper could fit between them. The captain's hand was on Nima's waist, and her palms rested on his chest. They were whispering to each other, occasionally interrupted by laughter. Then the captain leaned down and kissed Nima, not a friendly kiss, but a deep, passionate, intimate kiss. Nima not only didn't resist, but responded with such passion that Malik felt as if he had been punched in the gut. Malik wanted to rush over, drag that self-assured bastard away from his wife, but something stopped him. The cold, calculating part of his mind took over. He quietly backed away, trying not to make a sound, and hid behind a ledge, continuing to watch. Nima and the captain were completely absorbed in each other. His hands slid over her body with such confidence, as if he had done this hundreds of times before. She whispered something in his ear, and they both laughed. Then the captain pulled away and took something out of his pocket. It was a key. He placed it in Nima's hand, and Malik heard him say clearly, "Cabin 121. I'll be free in an hour. I'll wait for you there." Nima nodded, hid the key in her dress pocket, and kissed the captain again. Then they parted ways. The captain headed for the service door, and Nima stood for a minute, looking at the sea, and then headed toward the passenger cabins. Malik waited until they were both out of sight before emerging from his hiding place. Inside, he was a storm of emotions: pain, anger, humiliation, jealousy, all mixed together in a toxic cocktail. But on the outside, he remained calm. Too calm. Instead of returning to his cabin immediately, he walked around the deck, trying to collect his thoughts. The sound of the waves lapping against the ship's hull sounded like a mockery. 15 years of marriage, 15 damn years, and this was how she thanked him. By jumping into bed with the first captain she met, with a white-toothed smile and gold stripes on his uniform. When Malik finally returned to his cabin, Nima was lying in bed with a book, as if she had been there the whole time. She looked up and smiled. "How was the casino? Win anything?" "No," he replied curtly, avoiding her gaze so as not to give himself away. "Lost everything?" "That's too bad," she said, putting down her book. "I thought I'd have to come looking for you. You were so long." "I decided to take a walk on the deck after the rain. Fresh air and all that. She muttered, clearly losing interest in the conversation. I think I'll go to bed soon. I have to get up early tomorrow. Sure. Malik headed for the bathroom. I'll be in soon too. Closing the bathroom door behind him, he leaned against it and closed his eyes. His hands were shaking slightly. He turned the water on full blast so Nima wouldn't hear him pounding his fist against the wall. Something inside him had broken. Something important that had kept him within the bounds of civilized humanity. Returning to the room, he lay down next to Nima, who was already pretending to be asleep. He knew she was pretending. In 15 years, he had learned every breath she took. Now she was waiting for him to fall asleep so she could slip out of the cabin and run to her captain. Malik lay motionless, controlling his breathing to create the illusion of sleep. After a while, Nima carefully got up, dressed in the semi-darkness, and slipped silently out the door. When the door closed behind her, Malik opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. Nausea rose in his throat. He remembered their first meeting, their first kiss, his proposal on the beach in Florida, their modest wedding. She was there when he opened his first restaurant, supported him when he was on the verge of bankruptcy, rejoiced in his successes. He gave her everything he could: material comfort, status, security. Where had he gone wrong? When had he lost her? Malik got out of bed and walked over to the table where Nima had left her purse. She had always been messy, leaving things lying around. He opened the purse and took out her phone. He knew the PIN code. It was their wedding day. How ironic. He opened the messages and found an unfamiliar number with no name. The last message had been sent that evening. Waiting for you tomorrow at midnight at the same place. T. Just one letter, but Malik knew who it was. Tavan, the captain of the damn ship. Malik looked through the previous messages. There weren't many, all businesslike, setting times and places. No declarations of love, no intimate details. The captain was cautious, probably not the first time he'd been entertaining female passengers. Malik put his phone back in his bag and returned to the bed. But he didn't lie down. Instead, he sat down in a chair by the window, staring at the black sea beyond the glass. Something clicked inside him, as if a switch had been flipped from normal person to monster. He calmly considered his options. A scene of jealousy? A waste of time? Divorce? Nima would get half his fortune. Forgive her? Never. There was one option left, the one normal people don't think about. But Malik no longer felt normal. He felt betrayed, humiliated, trampled on. And he wanted Nima to feel the same way, before it was all over. He would be patient. Tomorrow was another day on this cursed ship. Another day of pretending. And then, the perfect moment for the perfect crime. In the middle of the Caribbean Sea, under cover of night, with no witnesses. And no one would ever know. Malik smiled at his reflection in the window. For the first time that evening, he felt at peace. The plan began to form in his head, crystal clear, flawless, like a polished diamond. Nima would regret betraying him. They would both regret it. Malik woke up before Nima. The sun was already flooding the cabin with bright light through the half-open curtains. He lay motionless, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous night in his head. The image of his wife in the captain's arms stood before his eyes like a brand. Strangely, in the morning, Malik felt not rage but cold determination. Pain and shock gave way to a clear plan. Nima stirred beside him and opened her eyes. "Good morning," she muttered sleepily, stretching. "Good morning," Malik replied, forcing an indifferent smile onto his face. "How did you sleep?" "Fine." Nima looked away. "Although the bed here isn't as comfortable as at home." "Of course," Malik thought. "You didn't spend the whole night here." He said aloud, "We're arriving in Santa Lucia today. Would you like to go on an excursion?" "Sure." Nima reached for her phone to check the time. "I'd like to see the volcano and the hot springs. I hear the views are amazing." "We'll book it after breakfast," Malik nodded, getting out of bed. He carefully monitored his movements, facial expressions, and tone of voice. Nothing should give away his true thoughts. While Nima was in the shower, Malik went over his plan in his head. It had to look like an accident. No witnesses, no clues. A dark night, The open sea, a high ship's rail, and a fall. The Caribbean Sea was full of sharks. By morning there would be no trace of his unfaithful wife. They had breakfast in the main restaurant of the liner. Malik ate his omelet, smiled, and discussed plans for the day as if he were a happy husband on vacation. If someone had been watching them from the side, they would have seen a normal family couple, a successful businessman and his beautiful wife. Captain Brooks appeared in the restaurant toward the end of breakfast. He walked around the tables, greeting passengers and inquiring about their comfort. When he approached their table, Malik felt Nima tense up. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Devante." The captain smiled his professional smile. "I hope you had a restful night?" "Excellent, Captain," Malik replied, looking him straight in the eye. "Although my wife complained about the uncomfortable bed. Isn't that right, dear?" Nima blushed slightly and nodded. "Yes, it's a little unusual after our bed at home." Malik noticed the quick glance exchanged between Nima and the captain, fleeting but eloquent. "Perhaps next time you should consider a deluxe cabin?" the captain suggested with a slight smile. "The beds are a little more comfortable there." "I'll definitely keep that in mind," Malik nodded. "Although I'm not sure there will be a next time. Work takes up so much time." "I understand," the captain nodded. "Then enjoy this cruise to the fullest. Today is a great day for excursions to Santa Lucia." When the captain had left, Nima took a sip of coffee without looking at her husband. "I think we should take the volcano tour," she said as if nothing had happened. "It leaves at 11. "Whatever you say, dear," Malik agreed. "Today is your day, whatever you want." They disembarked around 10 in the morning. Santa Lucia greeted them with bright sunshine and humid tropical air. The tour turned out to be longer than they had expected, almost 6 hours of traveling along winding mountain roads, visiting the volcano's crater, hot springs, and waterfalls. Nima seemed lively and happy, taking pictures of the scenery and selfies. Malik was the perfect companion, attentive, caring, offering to take pictures, holding her bag. No one would have guessed his true thoughts. When they returned to the ship, it was almost 5 in the evening. Nima said she wanted to rest before dinner, and they parted ways. She headed to her cabin, and Malik said he was going to have a drink at the bar. Instead of the bar, he quietly followed his wife. His suspicions were correct. Nima did not head for their cabin, but to a completely different part of the ship. Malik kept a safe distance, trying not to catch her eye. When she stopped at door number 121 and glanced back quickly before entering, his worst suspicions were confirmed. The captain's cabin. Even in the middle of the day, when most of the passengers had returned from their excursions and were getting ready for the evening, his wife couldn't resist meeting her lover. Malik felt nausea rising in his throat. He turned and walked away, afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself if he stayed there another minute. He spent the next few hours in the bar, methodically emptying one glass after another. But the alcohol did not cloud his mind. On the contrary, each sip of whiskey seemed to crystallize his resolve. The plan became clearer and clearer. Tonight, after dinner, a romantic walk under the stars that would end fatally for his unfaithful wife. Nima appeared in their cabin around 7 in the evening, fresh from a shower, her hair damp and her cheeks slightly flushed. "Where have you been?" she asked, pulling on her evening gown. "I thought you'd come back to rest before dinner." "At the bar," Malik replied honestly. "I was meeting some of the other passengers. I met a couple from Atlanta. They're also in the restaurant business." Lying came easily to him. He buttoned his shirt and walked over to Nima, helping her with the zipper on her dress. His fingers lingered slightly on her bare back. He had once loved this woman more than life itself. Now he wanted only one thing, for her to disappear. Dinner was pleasant. They sat at a table for 2 in the far corner of the restaurant. Malik ordered the best wine and even joked a couple of times, making Nima laugh sincerely. From the outside, they looked like a happy couple celebrating their vacation. The captain did not appear in the dining room, and Malik noticed Nima glancing at the door several times, as if waiting for him to arrive. "Darling," Malik covered her hand with his, "how about a walk after dinner? The sky is clear tonight. We'll be able to see the stars. Remember how we used to love walking on the beach at night?" Nima looked a little surprised, but nodded. "Sure, that sounds wonderful. Just like old times." Malik smiled, raising his glass. "To us." They clinked glasses, and Nima took a sip of wine, keeping her eyes on her husband. Perhaps for a moment a shadow of suspicion flashed across her eyes, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by her usual expression. After dinner, they went up to the upper deck. The night was truly magnificent. The cloudless sky was studded with stars, and the full moon reflected in the black water, creating a silvery path. A warm breeze ruffled Nima's hair, and Malik caught himself thinking that even now, knowing of her betrayal, he still found her beautiful. The deck was sparsely populated, a few couples by the railing, a group of young people at the bar under the awning, an elderly couple on a bench. Malik took Nima by the arm and led her further back, toward the stern, where it was quieter and darker. "Do you remember our first date?" he asked when they stopped at the railing. The ship cut through the waves, leaving a trail of foam behind it. "Of course," Nima smiled. "You invited me to your restaurant after the photo shoot. You only had one restaurant back then. And it was barely staying afloat," Malik added. "But you said you believed in me, remember?" Nima nodded, looking out at the sea. "I remember. You were so ambitious, so confident. I really believed you would make it. And I did." Malik turned to her. 7 restaurants in 3 states, a house in Bel Air, cars, jewelry, vacations, everything you ever wanted. Something in his tone made Nima tense. She looked away from the sea and looked at her husband. "What are you getting at, Malik?" "I gave you everything," he continued, ignoring her question. "I worked like a dog for 15 years to give you the life you wanted. And how do you thank me?" Nima took a step back, her eyes widening. "Malik, what are you—" "Don't you dare pretend!" His voice remained quiet, but it took on a steely tone. "I saw you with the captain last night, and I know you were in his cabin today." Nima's face changed. Shock gave way to fear, then a strange relief and finally determination. "Fine." She straightened up. "Yes, I'm seeing Tavan, so what?" Her directness caught Malik off guard. He had expected denial, tears, pleas for forgiveness, but not this challenge. "So what?" he asked, trying to control his voice. "You're my wife. 15 years of marriage, and you ask me, so what?" "When was the last time you were my husband?" Nima parried. "When was the last time you looked at me the way you look at your financial statements? When was the last time you asked about my feelings, my desires? You gave me a house and a bank account, but you took everything else away from me." Malik looked at her, unable to believe his ears. "So it's my fault? I've provided for you our entire life together, and you blame me?" "It's not about the money," Nima shook her head. "It never was. You've changed, Malik. The young, ambitious restaurateur I fell in love with is gone. He's been replaced by a cold businessman who sees his wife as nothing more than a status symbol. And that's why you jumped into bed with the first captain you met?" "Tavan isn't the first I met." Nima's face softened as she said his name. "He sees the real me. He appreciates me. He makes me feel alive." Malik felt a new wave of rage wash over him. "And what next? Are you going to leave me for this sea dog? Do you think he'll take you with him on his next cruise?" To his surprise, Nima smiled, calmly and confidently. "Actually, yes. This is his last cruise as captain. He's quitting to start his own yacht company in Florida. And yes, Malik, I'm leaving with him as soon as we get back to Miami." Her words hit him like a slap in the face. "You're leaving me, after everything I've done for you?" "I deserve to be happy," Nima replied simply. "And I'm happy with Tavan. He's a real man, caring, attentive, passionate. Everything you once were and have long since ceased to be." Malik felt something inside him break completely. A red veil of rage clouded his eyes. His hands reached for Nima's neck. "You ungrateful bitch," he hissed, squeezing his fingers around her throat. "I gave you everything." Nima tried to scream, but only a strangled croak escaped her throat. Her nails dug into Malik's hands, leaving deep scratches, but he barely felt the pain. His entire being was focused on one thing, destroying the woman who had ruined his life. Nima fought back desperately. Her eyes, wide with terror, begged for mercy. But Malik was deaf to her pleas. He didn't see the woman he once loved, but a traitor who deserved punishment. When Nima's resistance began to weaken, Malik loosened his grip for a moment. She gasped for air, and he saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. But instead of letting her go, he grabbed her waist and with one swift movement threw her over the railing. Nima didn't even have time to scream. Her body flashed in the moonlight and disappeared into the dark water. The splash was barely audible over the noise of the engines. Malik leaned over the railing, watching his wife's figure quickly recede, carried away by the current. For a moment, he thought she had fallen too close to the stern of the ship, but then her silhouette disappeared into the darkness. Malik looked around. The deck was empty. No one had seen or heard anything. The perfect crime. He took a deep breath of the night air, feeling a strange sense of relief. It was over. Now he had to establish an alibi. He returned to his cabin, locked himself in the bathroom, and examined himself carefully. There were drops of blood on his shirt. Nima had left deep scratches on his arms. Malik took off his shirt, folded it neatly, and hid it in a plastic bag. He would get rid of it later. Then he washed his hands thoroughly, washing away the blood and any traces of Nima's skin from under his fingernails. The plan was simple. He would go to bed and report his wife missing in the morning. He would say that they had had an argument and she had gone out for a walk to calm down. Of course, he was worried, but he decided she would come back when she had cooled down. He fell asleep, but in the morning he discovered she was still gone. Captain Brooks would know the truth, of course. But what could he say? Admit that he had slept with someone else's wife? Hardly. Besides, without a body and without witnesses, it would be his word against Malik's. And Malik knew how to be convincing. He lay down in bed, closed his eyes, and tried to calm his heartbeat. Tomorrow, a new chapter in his life would begin. A life without Nima, without betrayal, without pain. And if it took extreme measures to achieve that, well, she had made her choice. Malik woke up to the deafening screech of metal, followed by a sharp jolt. The ship shook and froze. The inertia almost threw him out of bed. He grabbed the bedside table, trying to get his bearings in the darkness of the cabin. The clock showed 4 in the morning. The emergency lights came on, dim reddish lamps along the floor. A few seconds later, the loudspeakers came to life and a calm female voice said, "Dear passengers, we apologize for the inconvenience. We are experiencing technical problems with the propulsion system. The ship has been stopped for diagnostics. Please remain calm and stay in your cabins. Further information will be provided later." Malik sat down on his bed, trying to calm his racing heart. Something had gone wrong. His thoughts flashed back to the events of the previous night, to Nima falling overboard, to her body disappearing into the dark waves. Could it be? No, it was impossible. It was. He heard hurried footsteps and muffled voices in the corridor. One of the crew members was running toward the engine room. Malik went to the porthole. All he could see through the glass was the black sea and part of the deck lit by emergency lights. The ship was indeed stationary. He quickly got dressed and looked out into the corridor. Several passengers in bathrobes and pajamas were already crowding around the exits, loudly discussing what was happening. Malik heard snatches of phrases. "Something's wrong with the engine. Maybe we're running aground. I hope this isn't Titanic 2.0. "Excuse me," Malik said to a steward passing by. "What's going on?" "Technical difficulties, sir," he replied with a forced smile. "Please return to your cabin. The captain will make an announcement shortly." "My wife went for a walk and hasn't returned." Malik tried to sound concerned. "I'm worried about her." The steward hesitated for a moment. "When was the last time you saw her, sir?" "This evening." Malik lowered his eyes. "We had an argument and she left. I thought she would come back when she had calmed down." "Please report to the reception desk," said the steward, already walking away. "They will pass the information on to security." Malik nodded and moved toward the stairs. He had no intention of returning to his cabin. He was drawn to where the commotion was loudest, closer to the scene of the accident. If his guess was correct, if Nima's body had somehow gotten caught in the ship's machinery, he had to know for sure. Following the group of officers in white uniforms, Malik descended to the lower decks. The lower they went, the stronger the smell became. A mixture of machine oil, salt water, and something metallic, reminiscent of blood. The corridors here were narrower, the ceilings lower, and the lighting dimmer. Finally, they reached the technical area. Heavy doors marked "Personnel Only" were wide open. Behind them was a spacious compartment filled with massive machinery and people in uniforms and overalls. Some were shouting orders, others were rushing back and forth with tools and equipment. Malik stopped in the shadows, watching what was happening. His gaze was drawn to a tall black man who, judging by his insignia, was a senior engineer. He was kneeling next to a huge metal cylinder, part of which had been dismantled. Next to him, two young mechanics in oil-stained overalls held flashlights, illuminating his work. "Holy shit," Malik heard one of the mechanics say. "What the hell is this?" The senior engineer, Malik recognized the name L. Jackson on his overalls, didn't answer, continuing to work carefully with some tools. Then he straightened up and turned to the younger employees. "We need to call the captain." His voice was low and calm, but with a distinct note of alarm. "And alert security. I think we have human remains here." One of the young mechanics turned away abruptly and vomited onto the deck. The second turned pale and grabbed the wall for support. Malik felt a cold sweat break out on his back. Human remains. Nima. He was overcome by a strange mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. Everything had turned out even better than he had planned. No one would suspect murder if the body had been torn to pieces by the ship's propellers. Engineer Jackson was giving orders. "Close off this area. No one is to be allowed in except the captain and security. And clean up this mess." He nodded toward the vomit. "I need a camera and something to get that out." Malik stepped back into the shadows as a breathless security officer ran past him. A few minutes later, Captain Brooks appeared, his snow-white uniform contrasting sharply with the dirty engine room. The captain's face was tense but composed. "Report, Jackson," he ordered, approaching the engineer. "Sir, the main left propeller has what appear to be human remains," Lamont said professionally, but it was clear he was struggling to contain his revulsion. "It looks like someone fell overboard and was caught in the propeller." The captain frowned. "Are you sure it's a human being?" "Take a look for yourself, sir," Jackson said, shining his flashlight into the dismantled mechanism. Malik couldn't see what the engineer was showing him, but the captain's reaction spoke volumes. Tavan Brooks turned pale, his face taking on an ashen hue. He recoiled and covered his mouth with his hand, clearly suppressing a gag reflex. "My God," the captain exhaled after a pause. "That's God." "We've only just started dismantling the mechanism," Jackson continued, "but we can already see fragments of, tissue, bones, and hair, sir. Long, dark hair." At these words, Captain Brooks visibly tensed. His gaze darted to the mechanism, then back to the engineer. "Keep dismantling it, Jackson." The captain's voice sounded hoarse. "We need to recover all the remains for identification." It took almost an hour to dismantle the screw mechanism. Malik remained in the shadows the entire time, watching what was happening. No one paid any attention to him. The crew members were too busy, and the other passengers were not allowed in. Malik watched as Lamont Jackson and his team methodically worked to remove piece by piece what had once been a human body. The sight was horrific. Even from a distance, Malik could see the mangled pieces of flesh, bone fragments, and fragments of clothing being laid out on the plastic tarpaulin spread out on the deck. Hair, long, black, tangled with metal parts and soaked in oil, lay in a separate pile. Those present worked in silence. Only occasionally muffled curses and the sounds of vomiting could be heard. Another young crew member had been unable to stomach the sight. Captain Brooks stood at a distance, pale as a sheet. He watched the process of removing the remains with an expression of horror and something else. Malik could have sworn it was personal pain. When one of the security officers lifted something shiny from the tarp and showed it to the captain, he shuddered and turned away. Malik squinted, trying to make out the find. It was a bracelet, a thin gold chain with a small starfish pendant. He recognized it immediately. He had given it to Nima on their 10th anniversary. She had never taken it off. The scene was becoming increasingly surreal. Soothing announcements for passengers were periodically broadcast over the loudspeakers, while the dismembered remains continued to be removed from the engine room. Finally, Captain Brooks gave the order. "Cordon off this area. Don't let anyone in. We need to contact the Coast Guard and local police and start checking the passenger lists. We need to find out who's missing." At that moment, Malik decided it was time to go back upstairs. His absence might arouse suspicion. On the way to his cabin, he thought about his cover story. Nima had disappeared the night after their argument. He had waited for her, fallen asleep, and planned to report her missing in the morning. Then the engine accident had happened. Naturally, he was worried and concerned, but had no idea what could have happened to his wife. It wasn't difficult. He just had to play the part of a concerned husband. When he returned to his cabin, Malik saw that the door was open, and 2 security officers were inside. "Mr. Devante?" one of them asked. "We've been looking for you. The captain would like to speak with you." Malik feigned surprise. "Of course, but what's going on? I was just about to report my wife missing. She didn't return to the cabin after our argument last night." The officers exchanged glances. "Please come with us, sir," said the taller one. "Captain Brooks will explain the situation." They were not taken to the bridge, as Malik had expected, but to a conference room on the administrative deck. Captain Brooks, the security officer, and an unfamiliar man in a formal suit were already there. "Mr. Devante," the captain nodded to him. "Please have a seat. This is Detective Lorenzo Kingsley of the Miami Police Department. He arrived by helicopter to investigate the incident." Detective Kingsley, a tall man of about 45 with a penetrating gaze, stepped forward and extended his hand. "My condolences on your loss, Mr. Devante." Malik froze. Were they already certain that the remains belonged to Nima? So soon? "Excuse me?" His voice trembled. "I don't understand. My wife is missing, yes, but why are you talking about loss?" Captain Brooks and the detective exchanged glances. "Mr. Devante," the captain began, "early this morning there was an incident. A human body was found in the ship's propeller. Among the remains was a bracelet that we believe belonged to your wife." Malik sank into a chair, his legs suddenly feeling like jelly. He had to act shocked and grief-stricken, which wasn't difficult given the circumstances. "No," he whispered. "This can't be. Nima, I'm very sorry," Detective Kingsley said, sitting down across from him. "But we need to ask you a few questions. When was the last time you saw Mrs. Devante?" Malik took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "Last night after dinner, we had an argument. She was upset and said she wanted to go for a walk, get some air. I waited for her in the cabin, but I must have fallen asleep. And then in the morning, there was all this commotion with the engine." "What was the argument about?" asked the detective, making notes in his notebook. Malik hesitated. He couldn't tell the truth, that he knew about his wife's affair with the captain. That would immediately give him a motive. "Nothing important," he replied. "About plans for the next day, excursions. Nima wanted to visit all the sites of St. Lucia, and I preferred to stay on the ship and relax by the pool." The detective nodded, but his expression was skeptical. "And after the argument, you just let your wife walk around the deck alone at night?" "She's a grown woman, detective." Malik shrugged. "I can't stop her from going out for some fresh air. Besides, it's a cruise ship. What could possibly happen?" The bitter irony of his last words hung in the air. Captain Brooks looked away, his face tense. "Mr. Devante," the detective leaned forward, "there is a witness who saw you with Mrs. Devante on the upper deck around midnight. You were at the railing at the stern. According to him, the conversation seemed tense." Malik felt a chill run down his spine. A witness? He was sure the deck was empty. "I don't understand what you're talking about," he said, trying to sound confident. "As I already told you, my wife went for a walk alone. I stayed in the cabin. The bartender at the night bar on the upper deck says otherwise." The detective looked Malik straight in the eye. "He was closing the bar and saw you both. He said you seemed upset, then grabbed Mrs. Devante by the arm and led her toward the stern." Malik's mind raced. The bartender. He hadn't noticed the bartender, but he could only have seen them from a distance, in the dark. Not enough to claim he'd killed someone. "Maybe he was mistaken," Malik suggested. "It was dark, and many of the passengers looked alike." "He's certain it was you," the detective pressed. "And there's one more detail, Mr. Devante. There were signs of a struggle on your wife's body, or what's left of it. bruises on her neck, fingerprints, and under her fingernails, we found skin particles with DNA that probably belongs to the person she was fighting before she died. Malik instinctively rubbed his hands, where Nima's fingernail scratches were still visible. The detective noticed the gesture. "Can I take a look at your hands, Mr. Devante?" "Why?" Malik clasped his hands in front of his chest. "I don't understand what you're getting at, Detective. My wife died in a terrible accident, and you're asking me these strange questions." "It's standard procedure," Kingsley replied calmly. "We have to rule out all possibilities, including the possibility that it wasn't an accident." A heavy silence hung in the room. Captain Brooks stared at the floor, avoiding Malik's gaze. The security officer stood by the door, ready to intervene at any moment. "Are you accusing me of murdering my own wife?" Malik tried to feign righteous indignation, but his voice trembled. "No one is accusing you, Mr. Devante." The detective paused. "But I need to see your hands, now." Malik realized he was cornered. Slowly, very slowly, he held out his hands, palms up. Deep scratches were clearly visible on his wrists and forearms, the same ones Nima had left when she tried to break free from his grip. "Where did you get those wounds?" asked the detective, although the answer was obvious. I hit the wall in the bathroom when the ship stopped suddenly." The lie sounded ridiculous even to him. Detective Kingsley nodded to the security officer, who stepped closer. "Malik Devante, you are under arrest on suspicion of murdering your wife, Nima Devante," the detective said in an official tone. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in court." As the officer cuffed him, Malik caught Captain Brooks's eye. There was no triumph in Tavan's eyes, as Malik had expected, only deep, endless sadness. It was the genuine grief of a man who had lost his beloved. This revelation hit Malik harder than the arrest and the prospect of life imprisonment. Could Nima have been telling the truth? Could this man really have fallen in love with her in a matter of days more deeply than he had in 15 years of marriage? "She loved me for 15 years, Malik said, his voice trembling. "And she only knew you for 3 days, and she still chose you. How is that possible, Captain?" Tavan Brooks did not answer. He watched silently as Malik was led away, and only when the door closed did he sink into a chair and cover his face with his hands. His immaculate white uniform was now splattered with machine oil and the blood of the woman who could have changed his life if she hadn't met her death at the hands of a man who once swore to love her.